I'm going to be talking about, before I actually get into that. I had just gone through the 8 conditions of processing information, or the 8 lawful conditions of processing information. So now I'm going to go through each one in detail with specific examples as well for each condition. Okay. So the first one, let me just go to my previous slide. So the first one is accountability, meaning that all organizations are required to have a person that is accountable and that will oversee that the organization actually complies with the provision of the Popia Act. Okay, so this person is the information officer and or deputy information officer, and then all employees should be aware who the information officer is. Okay, so now the next one, it is the second condition, is called processing limitation. So it requires that information must be collected legally, lawfully, in a transparent and reasonable manner, meaning did the data subject provide consent? So how they would provide consent if you are collecting information, for example, say me as a person who's in HR, I would give them personal information forms to complete so they are aware that they are parting with their informations, and then I would make them aware that the provisions of the Puppy Act will be complied by or compiled. I will comply with the provisions of the Puppy Act. Okay. So, in this way, they'll be providing consent, and then it will be by agreement, and then it will be in the best interest of the data subject. For example, I would need their personal information, their bank details, so that I can process payment for them, and then to ensure that they're also compliant with SARS, should I need to pay over pay as you earn for them, and then complies with the processing with obligations imposed by the law. Okay, so this is the second condition, which is called processing limitation. So now we'll go into an example that I actually came across in an article written by CDM. So I do provide a link in one of the slides where you can read the article in detail. It's quite an interesting article. So the title of the article, so I actually also stole their heading, their catchy heading. So it's Popia pops up in employment arbitration. So what happened here, it was during a disciplinary inquiry, the employee sought reinstatement because it said that the employer was not consistent in applying discipline. And then he or she had examples of 4 other people that had the same or similar offense, but that were not dismissed. Okay. So then the company argued that this information was actually not obtained with the data subject consent. So remember, when they talk about data subject, they talk about the person whose personal information is being processed. Okay, so then the company argued that no, this person did not obtain the information legally. So the data subjects are not even aware that this person came with the information here at the arbitration, and the employer asked the arbitrator to please remove that information from the bundle because it was not obtained in a lawful manner. Okay. So here, as you can see, my source is www.chmlegal.co.za. Poppy A pops up employment arbitrations. Okay. So now the contraventions that were done by the former employee is that the employee had obtained the confidential information of the 4 data subjects in an unauthorized manner. And then the employee did not present written consent. So remember, we are required to have written consent of the written consent of the data subject actually approving of us obtaining the information and processing. So the employee did not present written consent. So remember that you have to have consent from the data subject, as the example that I just made, where if I collect personal information of an employee, they would actually consent and sign the personal detail forms. So this employee did not present the written consent of the 4 data subjects, but he or she just presented their cases relating to her case, that they had committed a similar offense, but they were not dismissed. Okay. And then, if the confidential personal information of the 4 data subjects have been authorized in an by an unauthorized person in an unauthorized manner, the company has the duty to actually notify their four data subjects that their personal information has been accessed. Okay, so we're gonna get into more detail on that. So it's also another condition in the processing of personal information. It's the eighth condition, if I'm not mistaken, and that is the condition of data subject participation. So this means that when the data subject's personal information has been accessed or their confidentiality has been breached, then they have a right to be notified. Okay, so now the company had obtained this burden as a result of this employee obtaining the information in an unauthorized manner in order to prove inconsistency of the company when it came to the discipline. The summary of the case. So the employee was seeking to use such information in legal proceedings. So she had two options. The first option was to get the data subject's consent to use their personal information, or the other option was actually to because if it's in a legal proceeding, then the documents can be acquired, but then the necessary procedures have to be followed. So she did it in an illegal manner. Okay. So just to recap, the second condition refers to processing limitation. So personal information may only be processed if the reason for which it is processed it is adequate and relevant and not excessive. So in this case, it was relevant and it was adequate. It's just that the manner in which the person obtained it was not the right manner, in the sense that the data subject did not consent and then she did not follow the right legal processes to obtain that information. Okay, so here's another example. I made an example with myself collecting personal information for the purposes of paying employees and drawing up their contracts. So an example, I use an example of a doctor's practice. So they need to process the personal information for the identification of the patients. So you might find that when you go to a surgery or the rooms of a doctor for the first time, you are required to complete personal detail forms and then you sign for it as well. And then the purposes of that is to identify the patient for consulting, to give the patient treatment, for billing purposes if the patient is paying cash or if the medical aid does not pay, and then to claim also from the medical aid scheme. Okay, so only process personal information that is necessary to provide the necessary service or fulfill a purpose. Okay, so here we are applying the minimality principle, excuse me, meaning that I will not, let's say maybe I'm collecting an employee's personal detail forms, I will not ask them what political party they are affiliated with. I will not ask them their religion, because I do not need to process that for the purposes of employment, unless however I am recruiting maybe a minister, maybe for, or what do you call it, like a minister or a pastor for a church. Okay, so then I would need to find out their religion. For example, maybe if I'm recruiting for a Christian church, maybe somebody who is Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or the likes maybe might not be suitable for the role. Okay, so basically that's how the second condition operates, which is called processing limitation. So pray with me. I do hope that this actually does save. I'm having a bit of issues with my network due to load shedding. So this is my second attempt recording this, but I do hope and pray that it's gonna record. So let me know in the comment section if you have any question with regards to the second condition out of the 8 conditions of lawful processing of personal information. And in the same breath, I do have a DIY kit available, where you can actually download it and make sure that your organization is fully POPI compliant. So I provide the POPI policies and procedures, the appointment letters, and this training also. I have made it available. So it's all in one bundle of POPI compliance DIY, and you can also share the training with your employees.